welcome to another brand new episode here on 1950's Farm. How you all doing? Hope you're all having a good day. I hope you all have just had a lovely, wonderful Easter weekend. Now I realise that's going to be a very sort of kind of get with the times. It was last week because I'm obviously recording this at the Easter weekend, but you'll get it next week. But yeah, so I hope you all had a nice time with your family and didn't eat too much in the way of chocolate. As you can see, we've got the lorry out today, so we are out delivering our crops and getting the silos empty, because it's not going to be too long before we need to start filling them again. So harvest will soon be upon us. We've still got drilling to do, so the field to my left and to my right to drill, and also Harry's fields as well. But on this farm, left, right, and then just behind the farm there, we've got another field to drill, and we will will of course be getting on with that. So yeah. So there wasn't a video yesterday, mainly because, as I say, last week was the Easter weekend, and I decided that I had some things to do, so I went racing for Friday, Saturday, had a sort of day off Sunday from racing, only because Mum said she was going to cook a roast dinner. So day off Sunday, and then went racing again on Monday, but I got very wet Monday, so it could well be as well that if also this week there are a couple of days when and certainly for this week and the next fortnight, if there are days when there are no videos, it means that I've gone to Sheffield to watch the snooker. So what I tend to do is I tend to put myself on the reserve list, because it's one of those things I'm not bothered if I go or not, because it's on TV for the fortnight, so I can sit and watch it at home whilst playing farming sim, so it doesn't bother me whether I go or whether I don't, but I put myself on the reserve list, and then if they get a spot or if they get a couple of late cancellations, I get called up, and then I can just head to Sheffield and go and watch the snooker. So I don't go every year. Some years, like, I never get the phone call, and then last year I got the phone call twice, I think 3 times, and for one of those times was the final as well. So sometimes you can get lucky, and it's heavily reduced because it's very expensive to go to the snooker, and if you go on the reserve list, then as I say, if you're lucky enough to get called up, then it's like half the price, and you get to go and see snooker that otherwise you wouldn't get to go and see, because I got alerted about probably a little under a year ago that the tickets are on sale, and I went onto the website, and it was completely sold out. So not that I mind, as I say, because I go onto the reserve list, so it didn't really bother me. I prefer to sort of do it this way, and then all I do is go to Peterborough, catch a train, get off the train in Sheffield, catch the tram, and get off the tram, walk into the Crucible, and enjoy my day. And as I say, sometimes, not the last few years I haven't, but there's been occasions when I've been really, really lucky, and the person that's been unable to go has had a day ticket, so like literally from 10 o'clock in the morning till until the sort of the end of the evening session, which starts at 7 and can end at pretty much any time. The very first time I went to the Crucible, Dear. It was a wonder it didn't put me off. But I don't know, I wasn't really aware of it whilst I was in the Crucible. I was just kind of, wow, I'm at the Crucible, and like, you know, this is like the home and the mecca of snooker, and you know, I'm here, you know. And so my ex had, for Christmas, she'd bought me, or bought 2 tickets to the snooker, and it was quite funny. Well, it wasn't quite funny at the time. So I get up Christmas morning and I open up the, you know, the it's like an envelope that was gift wrapped, and it had 2 tickets in it. And I looked at her and I went, "You're nuts!" And she went, "Why?" And I said, "Because I've got agoraphobia. I can't go out." I said, "Like, how the hell do you expect me to get there? I don't need tickets to watch it on TV." And she was like, "Yeah, I know, but she said, like, I thought, you know, it'd be something that you would make the effort for." And I said, "It's not about making effort." I said, "It's about, like, you know, being terrified to leave the bloody house." And she's like, "Yeah, but," she said, "like, you know, you've always wanted to go, and I thought this maybe inspire you." Anyway, I was quite cross Christmas with her. And the reason I wasn't really cross with her, I was cross with myself, because I knew I wouldn't be able to go anyway. We get to the April of that year, and like from Christmas to April, I've been worrying about it like constantly. Anyway, she says to me, she says, "Right," she says, "look, I've booked us a good weekend." So I said, "Right." She said, "Saturday?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "We'll go racing at Birmingham." Right. She said, "We'll stay over in Birmingham." No. She said, "Sunday, we will drive over to Sheffield. We'll go racing in Sheffield." Right. "We'll stay in Sheffield overnight." No. "And then Monday, we'll go to the snooker, and then we'll drive home." She said, "And we've had a nice weekend." So I said to her, I said, "And how do you expect me to do any of that?" And she was like, she goes, "Well," she said, "like, you know, you've got to try and get over it." I was like, "Get over it?" I said, "Like, if I could just get over it," I said, "I'd get over it." I said, "I can't." I said, "It's this thing about going outside and being really nervous and really frightened." And she was like, "Well, what are you scared of?" And I said, "Well, in case my heart goes wrong, in case we get attacked, in case," I said, "you know," I said, "you know yourself, I have a tendency to say the wrong thing." I said, like, you know, I said, and it's not a forgiving world out there. I said, "This is the reason." I said, like, you know, I don't do friends. I said, because I say the wrong things all the time. I mean, I told the story, you know, a while ago. Now then, let's have a look. That's what I want. I said, you know, I told a story on the channel, you know, about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, something like that, where, you know, Mum's friends come over, and when I went racing, she was in a fantastically happy kind of mood. She was like, "Oh, you know," I forget the name now of I think it was Jenny. I think it was Jenny or Jane or something like that. The friends, and like her and Mum, and like, you know, and this other woman had been like mutual, you know, been friends for, you know, sort of years and years and years. You see, so I've gone racing on this Saturday night, right? The friend and her husband are around, like at Mum's, and I've gone racing, as I say. And when I left, everyone was happy, in a good mood. She was telling us that this friend was a bit poorly in hospital, but, you know, she's making a great recovery and she'll soon be out, and they should all meet up and go for a meal. And I was saying to Mum, "You need to go, you know, you need to get out, you know, you need to go and do these things." And anyway, I go racing, I get home, and Mum's friend's crying on the settee, right? And I got in and I said, "What's the matter?" And she's like, "You know, Jane?" And I was like, "Yeah, well, Jenny or whatever her name, I can't remember what her name was now." But I was like, "Yeah." She said, she said, "She's died." And I went, "When?" And she went, "This afternoon." I went, "Oh, that's terrible. Oh, that's terrible." Anyway, I don't know what to say, right? You know, I'm one of these people, I'm thinking, it don't really affect me. I'll give it, you know, do you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of, this is what I mean by about me upsetting people, you know. So I'm like, you know, I was like, So I'm sitting there, oh, that's awful. That, oh, I feel so sorry for you. Oh, you know, sort of what people do, you know. And then it's kind of like, you know, you trot out the usual lines. Oh, she was a lovely person. She kept herself to herself. You know, I'm sitting there. I mean, it's going, I don't think you should just be saying stuff like this. And I think that's like reserved for like murderers and psychopaths. And I'm thinking, ah, well, you know, it's just something you're saying it. So I'm sitting there. And I said, I know what everyone needs. She's like, what? Bearing in mind, you know, I'd gone racing at sort of like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. She arrived at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I've gone racing at 4. I've got home from racing at about 20 to 11, right? She's still there crying on mum's settee. And I said to her, I said, I'll tell you what I need, what you need. She said, what? I said, you need a cup of tea. So she's like, yeah, I really like a cup of tea. She's one of these friends that, you know, I mean, it's terrible and it's upsetting, but she was going to milk it for everything it was worth. Do you know what I mean? Like, she was one of these people, right? And if she listens to my videos, you know who you are. I quite like her, but, you know, like I say, she's a bit over dramatic. And so I said, I'll get you a cup of tea. So I said, does everyone want a cup of tea? Everyone wanted a cup of tea. So I goes out into the kitchen and make a cup of tea. I come back in. While I'm in the kitchen, I'm thinking, oh, you know, it's bad news. Like, you know, my little brother comes in and he's sort of chatting away. And, you know, and I said, I'll tell you what she needs. And he went, what? I said, she needs a joke. He said, probably not the time. I said, she needs a joke. He said, probably not the time, Jim. I'd leave it. I said, she needs a joke. I said, it'll cheer up a treat. He goes, well, he said, like, he said, it's up to you, mate. He said, but I'd leave it. He said, like, read the room. Anyway, I'm in the kitchen on my own now, finishing off the tea, thinking, and my head's going, no, don't tell a joke. Just don't tell a joke. Just don't. Yeah, just don't tell a joke. You know, it's fine. You know, you don't need to. You know, just go, oh, did-ums, you know, blah, blah, blah. Here's your tea. I'm going to go and get something to eat. I'll leave you to it, sort of thing. That's my head said. That's all you've got to do. It's like, drop the tea off. And then just go, I'm going to go and get something to eat. I'll leave you all to it. I'll see you next time. And my head's going, that's all you got to do. But on my other shoulder was another little voice going, yeah, tell him a joke. Tell him a joke. Yeah, that's what they need, a joke. She needs a joke. Everyone enjoys it. Laughter is the best medicine, of course. And I'm like, yeah, she needs a joke. So I've gone in. So I've sat down and I said to her, I said, I know what'll cheer you up. And my head's going, don't do it. Just don't do it. I know what'll cheer you up. She said, what will cheer me up? I said, I'll tell you a joke. She goes, I like your jokes, James. She said, they're very funny. I said, that's what I thought. I said, I'll tell you a joke. She said, go on then. I said, knock, knock. She said, who's there? I said, well, not Jenny. Hey. Well, see, I laughed. My head's kind of, I heard my head slap its own forehead. What have you done? It's funny. No, it's definitely not funny. Read the room. I was just kind of like, you know. Anyway, so I'm like, I said to Emma, I said, yeah, this is why I don't go out. I said, I'm terrified of saying the wrong thing. I said, because what's funny to me is not funny to a lot of other people. She's going, yeah. So she said, like, it's easy, isn't it? We go out. She said, like, we take nice deep breaths. I'm thinking, oh, we go with the hippie crap again. She said, and then she said, when we're spoken to, we talk. She said, we keep to the subject. She said, and we don't say anything off-piste. So I said, but that's the trouble. I said, I'm always taking the piece out of people. She said, yeah, well, you mustn't, you know. She said, like, and then you'll be fine. I said, what about if someone wants to rob me wallet? She said, well, give them your wallet. She said, there's nothing in it anyway. So I said, well, yeah, I know. I said, but that's not the point, is it? So she's like, you'll be fine. She's like, come on, we go out. So she said, well, this is the weekend we're going to have. She said, this is going to define and make us this weekend. She said, like, we're going to be great. Anyway, we went to Birmingham on the Saturday, right? I drove to Birmingham, right? Because I was told, oh, Birmingham's easy. You go down the A606 towards Northampton, turn off at Kettering, head towards Birmingham, about 2 hours, you'll be there, no problem, right? And in theory, that's what should have happened, right? So it was kind of like we're getting on the way. Anyway, we're on the A1 now, going towards. But I think it was the A1 going towards Birmingham, right? And the road, a bit like the other day when I went to Hensford, but it wasn't the same road because I went a completely different way. But the road sort of divided, so it was 4 lanes, and then it just divided. 2 lanes went sort of one side of the divide, and obviously the other two lanes went the other side of the divide. And we didn't know which side of the divide, right? And I'd read, because we printed it. This is before we both had I've only just recently got a clever phone, but I was going to say, why is that stopped unloading? There's loads of soybeans in there. Yeah, so I was like, we had to print it off Google Map directions, right? We had to print it off, right? This is how long ago it was. It's 2000 and... Oh, crikey, I forget now. 2013, I'm tempted to say. 13, I think it was. Yeah, I think it was 13, because she was right. That weekend did kind of sort of make us, really, because after that I kind of then, so with my agoraphobia, I could go to work because I was working on the second farm at that point. I could go to work and I was fine because I was in my tractor, I was in my own little space. I got on well with the lads, but they always just thought I was quiet because I thought, well, I don't want to say anything that upsets people. So I kind of sort of like kept myself to myself. I was quite quiet at work, and I think that's why I got on with everyone, because I wasn't me. So, normally people go to they go just be yourself. With me, they're like, just be normal. Just be like everyone else. Don't be yourself. If you're gonna be yourself, we're screwed. It's just like, So I was kind of like, I was like, So anyway, we get to. So I was able to go to work, as I say, and we're fine. Anyway, we get to this fork in the road, right? And I'd read the instructions, and I knew it said at the sort of the fork in the road, keep to the right hand side, right? So I'm indicating to get over, right? To get over to the right side. She says, "What are you doing?" I says, "We need to be over there." She says, "No, we don't." She said, "We need to be in the left side." I said, "No, I remember reading distinctly that we needed to be on the right side of the divide." So she said, "No, no, no, no." She said, "We need to be on the left side." So I said, "Look, Emma," I said, "don't argue with me." I said, "We need to be on the right side." She said, "James, we need to be on the left. Just stay on the left." So I turned my indicator off. I stay on the left. We've now gone wrong, right? We're now hopelessly lost, right? Now, if you've got I've got now a clever phone, which when I went to Hensford, a couple of weeks ago, I got a bit lost. No problem. The sat nav went, "Hang on, I'll just figure this out." Within 30 seconds, it come back, right, this is the way we need to go. That's no problem. A piece of paper doesn't do that. A piece of paper doesn't go, "Oh, hang on, you've gone wrong. Let me just re-scramble these words and I can get you out of this." Do you know what I mean? It just doesn't do it. So I'm sort of like, anyway, we got into Birmingham, didn't we? We went right into the middle of Birmingham, which was fine. I mean, it wasn't too bad. I mean, the traffic was hardly moving, so it wasn't like we were ever going to hit anything too hard. Do you know what I mean? So we were in the middle of Birmingham, right? And we couldn't get out, right? We just could not get out of Birmingham, right? Anyway, we started sort of stopping and sort of saying to people, or, do you know where the stock car track is? And they're like, "We've never heard of it, mate." And it's like, it's in Birmingham. You live in Birmingham. Surely you've heard of the stock car tracks. Like, "Nah, never heard of it, mate." Anyway, eventually we managed to find an English person, and we said to them, like, where the stock car track is, and they went, "Oh yeah, no problem. You want to go down?" Anyway, they wrote it down for us, right? Because I was shot to bits by this point, and so much so that there's a really big junction in Birmingham, right? And it's traffic lighted on 6 sides, right? It's a really big, and sort of all the roads cross in the middle, right? And as I say, it's really, and I've gone at this point. I'm a wreck. Like, you know, I just want to go home, but I can't even go home because we can't get out of Birmingham, right? Because we just keep going around the same one-way system, right? So I am a wreck, and I've gone the wrong way. I needed to go down there. I think I needed to go down there. Where am I? Where am I? Where am I? Yes, where am I? Yes, I have gone the wrong way. I need to go the other way. I couldn't find myself, and I'm like looking where all the little white dots are, and I'm thinking, how come I'm not any of them? And then I realised it's like, oh yeah, I'm down at the bottom of the map. See, I even go wrong on a computer game. Well, I say in my defence, I did come a different way to what I normally go to this thingy. I normally go up and round the top and then down, because it's one straight road then, I can't get lost. But yeah, anyway. So yeah, I couldn't even go home. Anyway, I gets to this, I'm coming up to this big traffic light, and we're having a sort of mini argument, kind of like, you know, this is all your fault, you know, because this is what happened. You know, I turn sort of very defensive. I don't do it no more, funnily enough. So like, I've actually sort of been and had proper, you know, sort of therapy to help get my confidence up, to help, you know, to sort of, and I don't do it anymore. Now, when there's a crisis, rather than sort of turn on the person that I'm with, I like go into sort of, right, let's get out of this. You know, we need to get out of this. You know, we've got ourselves in a bit of a pickle, and now we need to get out. You know, pickle? What the hell's anyway? So I'm sort of like, you know, like cheese, and I've gone straight over this, like through the traffic lights, straight over this crossroad, right? This major crossroad, like literally straight over, and somehow we've driven right between the traffic. I don't know how the hell we missed each other. Well, like, everyone missed sort of everyone, and everyone missed me, and I missed them, and that kind of like, and I pulled over, and I was in bits. I was like, and I'm saying to her, and I just want to go home, and she goes, we're here now. She said, like, we're not far. So I said, I just want to go home. I said, I've had enough. I said, I'm going to get killed out here. And she's like, well, if you stop at traffic lights, you won't. And I, you know, because that didn't help. And yeah, it was awful, it was. But anyway, we managed to get to the racing track, and then once we got to the racing track, it was kind of like, you know, right, just. But we were very late. I mean, we'd missed pretty much nearly all of the meeting. You know, we were very late, and anyway, we comes out of the racing track, and she says, right, she says, from here it's not that hard to the hotel. So I was like, right, okay. Anyway, it was that hard to the hotel. We were driving around Birmingham again, and eventually we rang the hotel. So, and they were like, oh yeah, no problem. You know, can you sort of describe what's around you? Yeah. And they go, oh, actually, you're not that far from the hotel. So it's like literally, what way you're facing. Now, if I'd have had my Volvo at that time, I could have told them what way I was facing, because my Volvo tells me what direction I'm pointing, whether I'm pointing north, northeast, you know. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, it tells me the direction that I'm pointing in. So I would have been able to have said, you know, oh well, actually we're, you know, pointing, you know, whatever. So we was just like, oh, we don't know. And then, you know, eventually we made them understand, and they literally talked us to the hotel when we got to the hotel. Very nice people. And anyway, we sort of got in the hotel, and we got into our room and what have you, and I was kind of sitting there, and you know, and I said to her, I said, I just want to go home. And she was like, she goes, no, you don't. She said, come on. Anyway, it was a good night. And we next morning, it's like, right, we'll drive to Sheffield. I said, have you paid for the tickets? She was like, for the racing I haven't, no. She said, for the racing we just turn up. I said, let's go home. She's like, "Oh, really?" So I said, "Let's go home." I said, we'll go home. I said, "We'll have Mum's Sunday roast." I said, "And then we'll make our way to Sheffield." I said, "We'll go to the hotel." I said, and then we'll and you know, I said, and then in the morning we'll just go to the snooker." I said, and then like that would be. I said, "I don't want to go racing." So she was like, "All right." She said, "Fair enough." So we were in the middle of Birmingham. We couldn't get out of Birmingham again. We were just going round and round and round the one-way system. Anyway, eventually we found a big Asda. It had now gone 10 o'clock, so it was open. So we get into the Asda. And anyway, we sort of like, we come out, and she's like, she said, "It's fine." She said, "I know the way to go." So I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Yeah." Anyway, eventually we get home, and you know, I'm a nervous wreck. I've driven home. It's all been a blur. Can't really remember any of it. We had Mum's Sunday roast, and then it's like in the evening, it's like I said, "I'm really not that bothered about the snooker, Em." And she's like, "Well, I've paid for it." She said, like, you know, and it was a lot of money. So I said, "I know." I said, "But like Sheffield," and I said, "Well, we're going to get lost again." She said, "No, we're not." She said, "Look, we'll print the things off." She said, "And then, you know, we'll be fine." She said, like, you know, "We'll be fine." Anyway, we got hopelessly lost again, and it was quite late at night, and we get into Sheffield, right? We're in Sheffield, right? And I've gone down this road, right? And I don't know if we was like right in Sheffield, or whether we were sort of right on the sort of cusp of Sheffield, like, but we've gone down this road, right? It's a dead end, right? There's a park at one end, right? And I kid you not, there was this gang of men, right? They weren't lads, men, right? There was this gang of men, right? Big black fellas, right? Gold chains, gold rings, right? Two of them have got baseball bats, right? And they start walking towards me, right? And the car, like, looking really menacing, right? I've panicked, right? Thinking, I'm not dying here. You know, I've come too far in my life. I'm not dying here. So I've like accelerated out, got straight up the wrong way up a one-way street, haven't I? And who have I met but PC Plod coming down the other way, right? And because, like, you know, he gets out, he's like, "What the hell are you doing?" You know, and I explain what's going on, and he's right, okay. He goes, "What I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse out. I'm going to put my lights on." So I said, "Yeah." He said, "When you see me put my lights on," yeah, he said, "I want you to drive forward, and I want you to turn left. Do not, under any circumstances, turn right. I want you to turn left." I'm like, "Okay, I'll turn left." So yeah, turn left, and they went down there. What happened after that, I don't know, but like, I tell you, mate, I was when I see them, I was really scared. Oh, look, that's our cotton's up. That's going to need hoeing, so that's another job that we've got on the list to do. And yeah, so oh dear me, it was crazy as hell. But I say nowadays it's not like that now. You know, thankfully, like when I got lost the other week at Hensford, it was kind of like, right, I was mad with myself, and I did get a little bit kind of anxious, you know, but quite quickly the sat nav sort of recovered me and got me out of it, and you know, I was sort of able to be back on my way again. I mean, I'm going again in June, you know, against my better judgment, but I'm going again in June. The British Championships are in Hensford, so I was thinking, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave really early in the morning, and even if I get there really early, I thought, like, I'm going to take my tablet with me. You know, I'm going to just sit in the stands. I'm going to, like, just, you know, sort of play on my tablet or whatever, and it's going to be fine. Like, it's going to be fine. Like, you know, it's going to be grand, no problem. You know, so that's what I'm going to do. I thought that way, if I go wrong, A, there shouldn't be that much traffic on the road. B, if I go wrong, you know, it shouldn't be too bad. But yeah, no, it was yeah, it's been an interesting. Like I say, I'm over it now, thanks to a very good man. And yeah, you know, it's amazing once you kind of uh, once you meet the right person. Because I'd had sort of therapy before. I'd been to sort of psychologists and whatever else, and because of the sort of behaviours that I in my younger days sort of kind of sort of my behaviours of the way I was. I remember I got so I went to the doctors with it. This was long before the second farm, and long before I worked on it. This was when I was working on the first farm. Well, actually, it was even before that, and yeah, it was even before that, and I I went to the GP. So my neighbour Mandy, the lady that checks these videos for me, to try and keep me out of prison and all. Um, because, as I say, I do have a nasty habit of saying, things that perhaps I shouldn't say because I think it's funny, And I mean, just like last Friday's recording. So I was recording Sunnyside Up Farms. Recorded this whole video. It was I felt a really good recording session, and get a phone call from Mandy. She's like, no, that can't go in, mate. You can't say that about those group of people. And I was like, yeah, but it's only a joke. She goes, yeah, but they're probably not going to see it that way, mate. She said, like, it's a good joke if you come round and tell me it. She goes, I'll laugh. She said, like, that's funny. She said, it is funny. She said, but you can't say that in public anymore. She said, like, not unless you are a top comedian like Frankie Boyle, Ricky Gervais. She said, then you can say it. She said, and people will take it for the joke it is. She said, but people with you saying it will take it highly offensive. You're being racist, you're being this, you're being everything else. You can't say it. So I then had to somehow re-record because it was a chatty video. Right? It was a chatty video for 55 minutes, and I'd already saved it and sort of come off the game because I sort of like, so yeah, I in the end couldn't, I couldn't put that video out, so I had to re-record it, and I had to find other stuff to do, which is not always easy, but yeah, so I was around Mandy's and I was sort of telling her, about my sort of going out issues. I'd say this was before I'd worked on any farm. This was before I'd even worked at Tisco's. This was about a year and a half after I left school. They moved in opposite side of the road to us. So where we lived, there was our house, and then opposite side of the road was semi-detached house, and then on the front one set of neighbours who were okay, but and then on the back of them, the other side was Mandy and her family who had just moved in there. And anyway, I was round telling sort of Mandy and what have you, and I didn't drive at that point either. So Mandy says, oh, well, I'll tell my daughter and she'll get you, to the doctors. You need to tell the doctor, James, you need to try and get this sorted out. You can't carry on with the rest of your life like this. She had, like, you're only, I think I was about 17, 18 at the time. She had, you need to be going out. You need to be doing things, And so, as I say, she tells the doctor, well, her daughter takes me to the doctors, we tell the doctor, and they get sent to this place, right, this rehabilitation place, right. It was awful, right, and I mean literally it was awful. There were druggies in there, there were alcoholics in there, there was like really some psychopathic people, and I'm thinking, this isn't the place for me. I'm not any of these things, I'm just afraid to go out. It's like, and because the other thing is as well, this place came to you and picked you up to make sure you went, so there was no, you're not going. Anyway, while I was there, I was very lucky that I got kind of quite good friends with one of the people that worked there. David, his name was Dave Hudson. If you're watching my videos, hello Dave, I haven't seen you for years, mate. You know, really need to meet up. You know, and everyone that watches these videos know I don't really do friends, but Dave was a very good friend. Mandy, very good friend. The friends that I do, you know, very good. And you know, I sort of like, you know, like to keep them around because you know, they're people well worth having in your life. I guess it's just a case of I don't really suffer fools too gladly. There's you know, a person in my life at this moment that's kind of like, oh, we're such great friends, and I'm thinking, no, we're not. Friendship isn't when you need something, you ring me up, and then, you know, I'm expected to sort of jump through as many hoops as you decide to put in my way. That's not how friendship works. You know, the people I'm friends with, they don't want nothing off me. I don't want nothing off them. But we just want to meet up, have a bit of company, and that's it. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know. And yeah, so anyway, I say I was lucky enough to meet Dave, and he kind of rescued and saved me, really, because so part of the sort of treatment was you had to go to this psychologist called Colin Turner, right? And I didn't realise, because no one told me. They just said, oh, you know, he's someone who's going to help you with the thing, you know, the things that are wrong. So I was like, oh, okay, fair enough. And it turned out, as I said to Dave, I said he doesn't really come across as, you know, a sort of therapist slash kind of someone. He said, I'll level with you. And I said, yeah. He said, but you mustn't like let on that I've told you this. He said, like, you know, because you're not supposed to know this. I said, go on, go for it. I said, I won't say a word. He said, he's a forensic psychologist. I said, a forensic psychologist? I said, don't they like watch murderers being interviewed and stuff? And sort of, he said, yep. I said, why on earth am I going to see him? I said, I've never murdered anyone. I said, I've no intention of murdering anyone. I said, to murder people, you have to go out. I said, the point is I can't get out. I said, and because like, yeah, Dave's kind of sort of like, he goes, I know. He said, I know. He said, but that's who you're with. So he said, and if you're with Colin, he said, you'll be fine. I was like, right, okay, fair enough. He said, if you go to the woman that works underneath Colin, you're screwed. I said, why is that? He said, because she locks everyone up. I said, what do you mean she locks everyone up? He said, honestly, she locks everyone up. She said, she's new into the game. She wants to make a name for herself. Bosh. Doesn't matter. You're locked up. So I was like, right. I said, and what are the chances of me getting her? He goes, if you manage to spend about 6 to 8 weeks with Colin, you should be fine. Right. He said, but he said, bear in mind, you know, he said this department needs to be locking people up, because in locking people up it means they guarantee their funding from the government. So I said, right. He said, so they're literally looking for anyone. You need to watch what you say. He said, if I was you, I said, yeah. He said, I wouldn't tell them any of the crap you tell me. So I was like, right, okay, fair enough, I won't tell them. So anyway, I get put underneath. Well, that's wrong. I didn't get put underneath her. that could have been a very interesting therapy session. It's the kind of therapy I could go for. But you know, I turn up to Colin one day, and Colin's like, he goes, "Oh, this is Lindsay," and I went, "Oh, hello, Lindsay," like this, and she goes, "Hi," and I'm thinking, yeah, you've already condemned me. Like, I can tell that from your eyes. And so, you know, I get Lindsay, and of course the first thing she does is executes the right. Apparently these people have a right to go to my home, go through my stuff, and, you know, to try and find out about me, because she's like, you're holding back on us. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Sorry, this is literally me, you know. I said, I'm terrified to go out. I said, I'll be honest with you, I'll level with you. I said, I don't think you're going to be able to help me. I said, like, you just don't seem like the sort of person that's going to be able to help me. And she was like, she goes, I'll be the judge of that. and she really wasn't very nice. I mean, she really was, a sinister piece of work, like. And she went through the place that I was going at. So you went to this place. It was called Riverside. It's called Riverside Rooms or Riverside House. I think it was Riverside House. And you went to this place, and as I say, in there, don't get me wrong, it was like a meet, and I originally thought, well, this is a good idea because it gets me out. It'll get me used to meeting people. It'll get, and I'll sort of get comfortable, and then they'll probably say, well, today we're going out, to this place, and what have you, right? So I'm thinking this is like, this might work, this might actually help. And then, as I say, you then get sort of assigned off to, sort of like psychologists and whoever, And you have to remember, as far as I can tell, I'm not nuts, right? And I'm sort of right. Anyway, Lindsay goes round and she picks up one of my story folders, and she's like, "Oh, this is interesting. You write?" And so I said, "Yeah." So she's like, "Well, what do you write?" And I said, "Murder mysteries." I said, I said psychological thrillers. I said, anything really. I said, if people, want a particular. I said, I have two ladies that I write for. I said, Mandy and Lorraine, both who check my videos. Very good friends with them. Like I say, the sort of people you want in your life, you want on your side, you want on your team. And I mean that for now, not for then. Now, I really know it. And I said, I write for them, and they tell me what they want, and of course, Lorraine being Lorraine, I love Lorraine. She's an absolute superstar. I love Mandy, but for different reasons. Like Lorraine is, she's a lot like me. She has a sense of humour a lot like mine, and she's fantastic. And she goes, Mills and Boone? And I said, yeah. She goes, I want a story like that. So I said, right, but a lot racier. So I said, right, okay. I said, I don't really write filth, if I'm honest. And she's like, you will for me. So I was like, yeah, go on then. I said, all right, who do you want to fall in love with then? So she goes, she said, just pick someone tall, dark and handsome. Anyway, as I remember, it was quite a good story, but that was in there, you see. And then these other like sort of psychological thrillers, and murder mysteries, and because Lorraine always, I don't know why, and I have asked her, and she goes, it was just because I could relate to them. That was the only reason. She goes, I didn't want these people murdered. It was just because I could relate to them. You say sort of, John Haynes or whatever, or Peter Haynes or whatever. She said, and I can, because I know who that is, I can relate, and so therefore the story sort of means something, So I said, okay. So she said, that's the only reason why I got you to use people we know. Whereas Mandy was like, no, you need to make people up. You can base them on real people, but you need to make them up, new names, new identities, new places to live, so I, sort of, but anyway, this Lindsay, she goes through my stuff because, the next thing I know is I go to the next session, a week later, and she's like, we're going to detain you under the Mental Health Act because those stories that you're writing are not stories. They're what you're actually going to do when we actually get you to be able to go out. And I'm like, no, they're not. I said, they're just stories. I said, I write. I said, I said, I said, surely it's good that I have a creative outlet, surely it's good that, I'm able to, sort of, anyway, and if it hadn't have been for, so it has to go to a review panel. So they basically have to, sort of back her decision up, right? So I get in front of this review panel, and I was representing obviously myself. I had Dave there on my side. I had Mandy and Lorraine on my side, right? And thankfully, beyond all Because as soon as like Lindsay kind of says like that's it, we're detaining you under the Mental Health Act of whenever, um, you're locked up. So I spent about a week and a half, I think maybe 2 weeks, locked in this place, and honestly, like it is not a place, you know, because I know a couple of people from school that have been in prison, for silly things like not for serious things, for silly things, and they've said like you hear these stories on the TV about old prison makes you worse and makes you sort of, if you like, conditions and grooms you into that way of life, and then you just can't leave it. And that's what that place would have done to me. I went in, I think, fairly sort of sane, apart from I couldn't leave the house and go out. You know, the things I saw in there, I literally stayed in my room. I was terrified to go out. I literally stayed in my room. And then there were, sort of sessions and things you had to go out for. You had no choice. Honestly, like I literally was absolutely terrified in there. It's not a place I ever want to go to. But I sort of thought, if I spent time here, got used to this, and I mean a significant amount of time, got used to this, began to buy into this way of life, I'd be trapped within the system forever. And I'm thinking, this, eventually, anyway, I get out, and Dave, sort of says to me, he says, we need to do something about her. So I was like, okay. So I ended up going to another psychologist, and he reassessed me, and he sort of basically said to me, you're a lad with problems, but he said, like, there's no red flags at all. He said, like, you've got issues, clearly. He said, like, obviously you've got issues. He said, like, and they need to be resolved, and we need to work through them. But he said there are no red flags. And eventually she was brought sort of before a hearing or a tribunal or whatever it was, because I actually wasn't involved in it. Because all I kind of got to hear about it was what Dave was telling me. But yeah, so as I say, but a few years ago, I was lucky enough to meet a guy, Andy, and I didn't meet him actually. To be fair, I emailed him because I got his email address from a nurse. So I was in hospital having a heart operation, and it was only a day operation. It was like literally a day thing. So I was in on the Friday. Operation was early morning. I'd have the rest of the day in. Like, I'd spend the night in hospital recovering, just making sure that my heart obviously had sort of, was not gonna sort of kick off about what we'd done to it, because basically, in layman's terms, what we've done, I'd had this new treatment called an ablation, and it's basically they set fire to the heart, and excuse me, they set fire to it, and this, because I have, touch wood, I don't have it at the moment, but I do take medication for it. But before I had the operation, I used to get arrhythmia really, really badly. So my heart would go from sort of 30 beats per minute to 300. Within within a second, it would just like literally be beating normally, and then just go, and then it would lock into 300 beats per minute. Now, arrhythmia is a life-threatening, sort of condition. So I had that on top of my heart condition that I already had, and the way that my heart's plumbed, it's not designed to be able to take 300 beats per minute. Hence the reason why it's programmed and sort of been messed about with and manipulated to beat at 30 beats per minute, which is the reason why I'm tired a lot of the time, and it's also the reason why I get out of breath a lot of the time, because my heart's not really pumping quick enough to provide my body with the amount of blood and oxygen and everything that I need, you see. And so therefore, because of my heart's been like this for years, my lungs are now sort of not working properly, because they've been designed to be able to sort of work in sync with, you know, and it's quite a complicated thing. As I say, it's a very rare heart condition that I've got. It's tricuspid artesia with ventricular and septal defect, which basically means your heart has 4 chambers. I've only got 1 working chamber, and now that I'm in my 40s, I've only got half of 1 working chamber. Because the other half has been set fire to. So the rest of my heart is dead. You know, when you look on, when you go for, you know, I think I've gone wrong. Have I gone wrong? I think I've taken a wrong. No, I'm okay. It's going to come up on the top left in a minute. Yeah, so when you look on sort of MRI scans and stuff like that, you know, my heart's just still, apart from this one section, the top right hand section is still going. Although the bottom right hand section is dead and doesn't move, it is used as part of the system to help pump my blood around the body sort of thing. But yeah, so I had arrhythmia, so I had to go and have this. Well, when I got there, because of my sort of anxiety problems and stuff like that, they kind of really now only flare up really bad when I go to hospital, because I'm terrified that I'm not coming out. You know, because I obviously know that's going to be the reality at some point, you know. And you know, so I get really sort of anxious. Well, when I go to the hospital in London, St Bart's, I always get my own room. I get my own room, you know, with a bed, TV, sort of, you know, sort of home comforts, you know, sort of, you know, get my own fridge where I can have my own food and like what have you. And this young nurse, lovely lady, you know, came in one night, and one after I'd had my operation. It was about 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening, and there'd been a little bit of an incident earlier in the day between me and an Irish male nurse, and Vivian, my heart surgeon, was absolutely livid with the way that he treated me. It really wasn't very good. But because I was sort of still coming around from, you know, 9 hours of anaesthetic, or however you pronounce that word, I was a bit groggy and sort of didn't really fight back as I would have done if I'd have been sort of fully with it. And yeah, so I sort of, but anyway, she got to hear of it, and he got suspended pending. It always happens to me, pending a full investigation. And as I say, I you know, Vivian came in, you know, and she was like, "I'm very, very sorry that this has happened. I'm very, very sorry that he treated you this way. You know, a few of the patients have said that, you know, he was bang out of order. He was really mean to you, and you know, his care was not very good." And I sort of sat there and, or laying there, and I was sort of like, anaesthetic makes me really emotional, and because of his actions, it made me really sick as well, because he wouldn't give me the sickness drug after I'd been in. So I'd had it pre-operation, but I then apparently I had another load while I was actually under anaesthetic, and then the sort of third load, because you're supposed to have it in 3 doses, he refused. He's like, "No, you know, you don't need it. It's ridiculous that a grown man, you know, has a phobia of not being very well. You know, you don't need it. You're not having it. You know, call yourself a man. You're a disgrace. You know," and all this, like, and like I say, because I was sort of kind of awake but out of it, you know, I sort of didn't really fight back. But luckily, as I say, other people heard, and another nurse heard, and luckily she gave me, you know, the drug that I needed. But by then it was too late, because I'd already been. But it meant I wasn't anymore. Yeah, so she comes in and she sort of says to me, she says, wow, there's a lot of fuss around you, sort of tell me your story. And we got chatting and we got talking, and she was like, I know someone that can help you. And she gave me his email address. I emailed him, and then he emailed back and said, I'm sorry, I can't really help you, blah blah blah. He was private, but he did, people that he thought were really in need, that couldn't afford to go private with him, he would help. And then another few months passed, and then he emailed me back and said, I've had someone that I was helping kind of throw it all back in my face. It's really left me quite cross. I see your email, and what have you. I'd be interested in knowing more. I'm going to give you a call. Can you please give me your phone number? So I gave him my phone number, or emailed him my phone number, and he gave me a call. And as I say, the rest is history, because after working with him and doing all the things that he said, and following all of his instructions and doing all of that, I'm now to the point where I can drive myself to Birmingham. Yes, it went wrong. Yes, I kind of got a bit panicky and a bit frustrated, and I kind of got angry with myself and this, that, and everything else. But that's the first time I've ever attempted anything like that by myself. And the important thing that I think he's managed to kind of teach me is to not beat myself up for that, to not continually go over the negatives, to actually look at the positives. The positives is I still got there. Yeah, all right, I didn't really sit for the racing because I just wanted to go home again, because I felt the whole day a little bit overwhelming. But I now feel in the position that next time when the British Championships are on, right, I'm going to go early, right, I'm going to pack some food so that I'm not going all day without food and drink. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to make sure this happens, I'm going to make sure that's in the car, and all of a sudden then that will help to mean and hopefully be that I have a much better day, and so as I say, I'm entirely sort of grateful to him and to Jasmine for getting me over my fears, my phobias, and my agoraphobia and everything else. They really did do a fantastic job, and so I'm really grateful. Anyway, I have gone on for far too long in this episode. We have now, but for a little bit that's in here, there's not much in here. So I'm going to get this one sold, and that's going to be sort of pretty much that for this episode. And then what I'm going to do is, when we come back tomorrow in the next episode, we're going to be down this end, and we're going to be finishing Harry's drilling. And then once we've finished Harry's drilling, we've just got the dairy farm to drill. And then by sort of May, June time, the hay can start to come off. So we need one field of round bales for ourselves, and then we need a field of square bales for the ranch, but we'll take them direct from the field. So as we're baling, we will take the hay bales straight to them, so we won't need to store them. So we are still doing that. Yeah, like I say, there was just about enough in here for a load. So yeah, thanks ever so much for watching, thanks ever so much for listening. If you've got to the end, I really do appreciate it, and I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Bye for now.